From the darkness, a boy stepped forward. Barefoot, head bowed, his small frame shivered in the cool night air. His eyes darted to the object waiting at the end of the hall, a golden crown, gleaming under the lamplight. But this was no coronation of honor, no promise of freedom. This was the first step into a life he had never chosen. This is the true story of how a Roman emperor destroyed a child to recreate the wife he murdered. Nero Claudius Caesar, ruler of Rome, fancied himself a poet, a musician, and a visionary. But behind the gilded facade of an artist king lurked a man feared across the empire for his appetite for blood. He had ascended the throne young, charming enough to seduce the public with games and spectacles, but that charm was a thin veneer over a mind warped by paranoia and indulgence. This was the emperor who had ordered the deaths of his own mother, Agrippina, and his first wife, Octavia. The latter, after subjecting her to wrongful accusations, exile, and finally a brutal execution. The same man who is said to have watched Rome burn for days, strumming a lyre as flames devoured the city. Nero's court was not a place of safety. It was a gilded pit where flattery could buy you a moment's favor, and the slightest misstep could end in exile, torture, or worse. Senators, generals, and even members of his own household lived in constant fear, knowing the emperor's moods could swing from playful generosity to murderous rage in the span of a heartbeat. In such a place, to catch Nero's attention was not a blessing. It was a dangerous summons. And for one young boy named Sporus, it would be the beginning of an ordeal so grotesque, it would make even Rome's jaded elite whisper in horror. In the grand sprawl of Rome, among its senators, soldiers, and slaves, Sporus was a boy whose life might have passed entirely unnoticed, if not for his beauty. Sources describe him as striking enough to draw the gaze of the most powerful man in the empire. He wasn't born into influence or privilege. If he had any family, history has forgotten them. He held no titles, commanded no armies, and had no means to defend himself from the whims of those above him. We don't even know his real name. The one history has preserved, Sporus, may not have been a name at all, but a mockery. In Latin, it could mean seed or sow, a word that strips a person down to an object, a possession, or worse, a joke. It's as if his identity had been erased before the world even heard of him. A boy like this had no control over his fate in Rome's imperial court. In the wrong eyes, beauty was as dangerous as treason. And when those eyes belonged to Emperor Nero, it meant Sporus's life was about to be torn from his own hands and remade into something unrecognizable, something unnatural. To understand why Sporus's life was twisted so cruelly, we must first turn to the woman who held Nero's heart and his madness, Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea Sabina was everything Nero desired: radiant beauty, refined charm, and a ruthless ambition that matched his own. She had been his empress, his companion, and for a time, the center of his world. But in the chaos of the imperial court, love could be as dangerous as politics. One day, in a fit of rage, some say over a petty quarrel, Nero struck her. The blow was fatal. She was carrying his child at the time. In that moment, the woman he adored became another name on the long list of those destroyed by his hand. Grief, however, did not bring remorse. It warped into something darker, an obsession that refused to let her go. Nero could not bear the emptiness her absence left, nor the reminder that his own violence had created it. In his mind, Poppaea could be brought back, not in spirit, not in memory, but in flesh. He began to imagine a living substitute, someone who could stand where she once stood, wear her clothes, speak in her tone, smile as she smiled. It didn't matter that such a thing was unnatural, impossible. For an emperor like Nero, desire was not bound by law, morality, or mercy. And from that desire came an unthinkable command, one that would forever alter Sporus's body and fate. The order came without warning, carried not in shouts, but in the quiet authority of imperial command, the kind that brooked no refusal. Sporus, still barely more than a boy, was told nothing of mercy, nothing of choice. The emperor had decided he would be remade. In the Roman world, castration was rare and deeply taboo, a mutilation that stripped away more than the body. It erased a future. But for Nero, it was simply a step toward his vision. Sporus, he believed, must never grow into the broad-shouldered, bearded image of a man. He had to remain soft, smooth-faced, eternally frozen in the image of Poppaea Sabina. The act itself was as brutal as it was final. In some dim chamber of the palace, with only the cold gleam of metal for company, the boy's body was altered beyond repair. The pain was immediate and searing, but the deeper wound was slower to reveal itself, the realization that his life no longer belonged to him. When it was done, the boy who entered that room did not walk out again. In his place was someone else, someone molded by violence, renamed by the emperor, and destined to play a role written in another's shadow. It was not the beginning of a new life. It was the end of his own. The palace was lit as if for triumph. Torchlight spilling over polished marble, the air heavy with perfume and murmurs of disbelief. At the center of the spectacle stood Sporus, no longer dressed as the boy he once was, but swathed in silks of imperial purple and gold. Jewels glittered at his neck and wrists, the very ornaments once worn by Poppaea Sabina. His hair was arranged in her style. His every step was choreographed to mirror the woman Nero had loved and killed. Before the gathered senators, generals, and courtiers, Nero took his hand. The emperor wore the expression of a man reclaiming something lost, not acknowledging the fact that this was a farce in the eyes of Rome. There, under the vaulted ceilings, in a public ceremony cloaked in religious solemnity, he married Sporus. He spoke Poppaea's name, not the boy's. The garments, the jewels, even the voice he demanded from him, all belonged to the dead empress. The elite of Rome watched in frozen silence. To object was to invite ruin, to laugh was to invite death. So they clapped, bowed, and feigned celebration, while everyone understood the truth. This was not a wedding, but the crowning of a possession. Nero had remade the past in flesh, and Sporus was now trapped inside it. From that day forward, Sporus lived not as himself, but as the shadow of a dead woman. Wherever Nero went, the theatre, the chariot races, the great banquets of the imperial palace, Sporus was at his side, clothed in Poppaea's silks, veiled in her style, and adorned with her jewels. The court addressed him as they had addressed her. He was expected to respond in her voice, to carry her mannerisms, to smile when Nero smiled, to lower his eyes in the exact way she once had. It was more than acting. It was erasure. Every public appearance became a twisted theatre. The people of Rome whispering behind their hands, the senators keeping their gazes fixed forward, the soldiers exchanging uneasy glances. Some saw it as madness, others as blasphemy, but all understood it as a demonstration of the emperor's absolute power. For Sporus, each outing was a ritual humiliation, Every step in Poppaea's sandals was a reminder of what had been taken from him, his body, his name, his future. Yet the performance could never falter. To break character, even for a heartbeat, was to risk the emperor's wrath. Nero had not just claimed Sporus as a possession, he had rewritten his very existence. Now, in the eyes of Rome, the boy was no more. Only Poppaea remained. By 68 CE, the empire that had once bowed to Nero's will was unraveling. The provinces burned with rebellion, the treasury groaned under the weight of his extravagance, and even the Praetorian Guard, his supposed shield, began to turn. In the Senate, whispers of treason grew bolder. In the streets, riots erupted. For Nero, the tide was irreversible. As armies marched against him and allies deserted, the self-proclaimed artist emperor found himself cornered. No ovation could save him now. No staged performance could change his fate. On a June morning, facing capture and the humiliation of public execution, Nero took his own life with the help of a loyal servant. His reign, a spectacle of cruelty, indulgence, and paranoia, ended not with a grand imperial farewell, but with a desperate whisper, "What an artist dies in me." For Sporus, Nero's death did not bring freedom. Instead, it placed him in even greater danger. The boy turned empress was no longer a curiosity of the imperial court. He was a valuable symbol. The powerful men scrambling to seize the throne knew that possessing Sporus meant inheriting a twisted fragment of Nero's legacy. And in Rome, symbols could be just as deadly as armies. With Nero gone, Sporus's life did not return to his own. Instead, he became a prize to be claimed, a living relic of the dead emperor's most infamous obsession. First, he was taken by Otho, the man who had once been married to Poppaea before Nero stole her. Otho, now briefly emperor, paraded Sporus as a trophy, a reminder of his personal connection to both Poppaea and the former ruler. To the watching crowds, the sight was bizarre, even unsettling. The same delicate face framed in silks, the same jewels once worn by the empress, now haunting Rome like a ghost that refused to fade. When Otho fell from power, Sporus passed to Vitellius, another ambitious claimant to the throne. For Vitellius, Sporus was not merely a curiosity, but a prop for grotesque political theatre. Ancient accounts claim he devised a chilling spectacle, a public reenactment of Poppaea's death, with Sporus forced to play her part. The plan was to stage a lavish show in which Poppaea would be killed again before the eyes of Rome. In the games of emperors, Sporus was never a person, only a role. And now, that role was about to become deadly. By the time Vitellius's ghastly plan was whispered through the streets, Sporus knew there would be no escape, no mercy. He had endured the blade that took his body, the silks that stole his identity, and the endless charade that turned his life into a stage. But this, to be paraded before the jeering mob, forced to relive the death of a woman he had been made to replace, was a degradation beyond endurance. In a city that had watched him for years as a living ornament of imperial excess, there would be no place to hide. The arena would roar, the spectacle would proceed, and he would die not as himself, but as the emperor's phantom wife, murdered for the crowd's amusement. Sporus made his choice. Ancient historians tell us he took his own life before the performance could begin, robbing Vitellius of his cruel entertainment. He was still little more than a youth, a boy who had been remade, renamed, and rewritten by the whims of emperors. In the end, the only act that was truly his own was the one that ended his story. And with his death, the bride of Nero vanished from Rome forever. Sporus was more than a victim caught in the machinery of imperial cruelty. He was the embodiment of how beauty, in the wrong hands, could become a weapon. In Nero's Rome, appearance was not simply admired. It was owned, reshaped, and consumed to serve the fantasies of the powerful. For Sporus, that beauty became a sentence, binding him to a role he could never escape. A life where survival meant surrendering every piece of himself. His story forces us to see past the marble and gold of the empire, into the shadowed corridors where personal desire outweighed human dignity, and where a single emperor's obsession could destroy a life as easily as signing a decree. Today, we remember him not for what he said or did of his own will, but for what was done to him. A boy turned into a symbol, then discarded when his usefulness faded. Was Sporus remembered because of love, or because his life reveals the very depths of human cruelty?